Vaheguru, 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 Vaheguru. Stop the narcissists now. Don't try to help narcissists. They are beyond any form of help and are better than that. If you try to help them, they will simply think that it is you who requires help and not them. And the very characteristics of narcissists renders it almost infeasible to change them into something better. The case is the same. Even with an expert therapist, if you happen to try to change them yourself, it will be a futile attempt, as they will in turn manipulate you and make it look like it's your fault and not theirs. In the end, trying to change or help them will ultimately lead to receiving a blow to your own self-respect and integrity. Yes. Vaheguru, Vaheguru. Narcissists are threatened and enraged by trivial disagreement, mistakes, and misunderstandings. Plus, they have evil mouths and will say anything. So, if you continue to live or work with narcissists, expect to have a cleanup after them, expect to lose friends over them, expect big trouble sooner or later. As soon as you try to get close to them, they'll say that you are too demanding, and if you ever say I love you, they'll presume that you belong to them as a possession or an appendage and treat you very, very badly right away. The abrupt change from decent treatment to outright abuse is very shocking and bewildering, and it's so contrary to normal experience that I was plenty old before I realized that it was actually my expression of affection that triggered the narcissist's nasty reactions. Children of narcissists tend to feel overly responsible for other people. They tend to assume that others' needs are similar to those of their parents and feel compelled to meet those needs. By responding in the required manner, they tend to be unaware of their own feelings, needs, and experience and fade into the background in relationships. You can get along with narcissists by treating them as infants. You give them whatever they want and need whenever they ask, and do not expect any reciprocation at all. Do not expect them to show the slightest interest in you or your life. Do not expect them to be able to do anything that you need or want. Do not expect them to apologize or make amends or show any consideration for your feelings. Do not expect them to make ordinary responsibility in any way. It's impossible to be overemphasizing the importance of narcissists' lack of empathy. It colors everything about them. I have observed very closely some narcissists I have loved, and their inability to pay attention when someone else is talking is so striking that it has often seemed to me that they have neurological problems that affect their cognitive functioning. The narcissist has an admirable self-image, believes self to be meritorious, special if not unique, deserving of great admiration, and acting in a grandiose or self-assured manner, often without commensurate achievements, and has a sense of high self-worth despite being seen by others as egotistic, inconsiderate, and arrogant. To all the brave survivor, it's not your fault. It was never your fault. The narcissist delights in fooling people, especially lovers, with betrayals and sexual infidelities. When the victim discovers these things, the narcissist feels contempt and justifies because the victim could be fooled so easily. I like narcissist to a parasitic worm that manages to penetrate under the skin and bear this out of the sight of witnessing eyes, but are free to endure, to consume it whole. Leaving trauma and disease in its wake. By the way, the narcissist can manage to live on inside the victim even after they manage to escape. It is as if the seed goes on. Your narcissistic partner may have secret online affairs with one or more people. When you discover this and confront them about the infidelity, they will claim that it wasn't really cheating because it wasn't physical, and they will say that people online aren't real people anyway. They are hiding this from you, proves that they knew all along that their behavior was wrong. When I speak of narcissist abuse that can lead to narcissistic victim syndrome, I am speaking about a form of abuse that is very insidious, What I mean by insidious is that the abuse is covert, cunning, and often indirect. This form of abuse is often carried out in subtly and clandestine manner because narcissists do go to great pains and to avoid being observed publicly as being abusive. The narcissist tries to control the expression on your face, which is also trying to control your thoughts and feelings. They will say things to you like, don't look so sad, don't look so serious, don't make that face, don't look so smug, don't look at me like that, etc. When you get upset with the narcissist's words or behaviors, they will try to deny you the right to be mad. They will say things to you like everyone has to walk on eggshells around you. You know that you are the way too sensitive. You're always looking for a fight. You just like to complain, etc. The narcissist is an explosive bully who will not recognize the boundaries and the separateness of other people within their sphere. Even simple, insignificant things such as hanging the toilet paper roll the opposite direction or disregarding the narcissist over how to cook a certain dish can and will result in a calm narcissistic instantly transforming into a tyrant of the warmer path. The narcissist will try to get you second guessing yourself. You will do this by asking you things like, don't you think you are overreacting? What's wrong with you? Can't you take a joke? Why are you making such a big deal out of this? Why do you always have to analyze everything, etc.? This Dr. Jekyll and Dr. Hyde behavior of the narcissist, loving 1 minute and totally enraged the next, can inflict great harm on the victim. Understandably, the fear, distress, confusion, inner turmoil and chores that they experience leave them walking on eggshells. In order to avoid further conflict with the narcissist, the effect on the victim over time can be very crippling indeed. Being married to a narcissist is like trying to raise someone else's spoiled brat. They know you are not the parent and you can't go ground them or take away their toys, so they deviously wreak havoc unbridled. If you are having or have had a conflict with someone, the narcissist will be sure to take side and put all the blame on you. They will say things like maybe they were just having a bad day. You just took it wrong and never had a problem with them, and you have a problem with everyone, etc. Narcissist 10 commandments. Thou shalt prefer no other person over me, for I am an extremely jealous narcissist. Thou shalt keep all my dirty secrets unto thee, or I shall rip thee to shreds and make thee suffer forever. Thou shalt speak only flatteries about me, or I shall lapse into hysterical crying and self-pity. Remember my birthday, you keep it holy. It's the least you can do after all I have sacrificed for you. Honor me no matter what I do or say, or I shall inflict pain and suffering about you. Thou shalt never be able to earn my love, but I shall rejoice at making you work for it anyway. Thou shalt always commit to agree with me, or I will make thee suffer for all eternity. Thou shalt not see what I steal from thee, lest I remind you how indebted you are to me. Thou shalt not bear any truthful witness against me, for I shall deny everything. Thou shalt envy me and praise me and respect me and call me wonderful. I spent 6 years with my narcissist spouse, and in those years, the narcissist could not sit down and resolve any conflicts at all or take any responsibility for any of the troubles we were having. The excuse was always the narcissist grew up in a home where things weren't talked about. The truth was, if there was a respectful conversation to take place, the narcissist would have to own up to that bad behavior, and that's impossible for the narcissist. Finally left, and I'm enjoying adult conversation with relationships once again. Call them out, and they will leave. The narcissist loves telling you how you should feel. You'll often hear this from their mouths. You shouldn't let that bother you. You should just forget about it. You should be ashamed. You shouldn't say that. You should be thankful, etc. Nothing the narcissist has or no one they know, including family, is ever perfect enough to satisfy them. They will constantly complain and criticize to the point of the insult and verbal abuse. The narcissist will complain about the same exact thing for years on end, and they will never do anything constructively to improve or change the situation. When confronting a narcissist about their awful behavior, you may try to convince you that you have PTSD and you blow things out of proportion, and that you have cognitive problems and you process information in a defective way. The problem is your thought process is not the poor abuse narcissist behavior patterns. Pathological narcissists are evil. When faced with the choice of what is right and what's wrong, they will choose the latter simply for the fact that they can. What they can't they seek to destroy their ability to manipulate, humiliate, and subjugate makes them feel all the more powerful. And since all they feel is nothingness, feeling powerful is certainly better than nothingness. The narcissist is like a snake, always looking for an opportunity to start an argument, and will fight incessantly and pointlessly about the same exact thing round and round for years and years. The narcissist will always be the one to start arguments, and often for no particular reason. Narcissist needs to win every argument and will never stop raging until you back down first and allow them to have the last word. Beware, thought the narcissist's last words. Once they have reached a state of violent rage, will always be cutting, insulting, abusive, meant to injure or even destroy you if possible. The narcissist is self-serving and will use guilt trips, tell lies, spread gossip, fish for compliments and validation, pretend to like people, manufacture convincing but fake emotions, and generally use anyone or everyone within the narcissist's sphere to achieve his own agenda, which is often as a code a very confusing, convoluted, and illegal agenda. The narcissist will trick you into believing he cares for you only to malign you later on when it suits him or her. The narcissist invalidates your feeling and orders you to suppress your emotions by saying things like this to you: lighten up, get over it, grow up, stop whining, give it a rest, don't be so sensitive, stop being so emotional, stop taking everything so personally. The narcissist is always right about everything. You cannot reason with the narcissist or get them to see any side of any story but their own side. The narcissist will never consider any point of proven fact that differs from their belief, but will instead argue incessantly to defend their beliefs, opinion, or story. If the narcissist is unable to convert you to their own warped truth, they manipulate you with guilt for daring to see things differently than the narcissist. Persons who seem to have a lot of self-confidence and seem to be arrogant are much too easily called the narcissist. Of course, they can be a narcissist, but that is not always the case. The essential hallmark of a narcissist is his or her long-term antisocial behavior with a highly related, reduced empathetic ability. This behavior pattern is structural and cannot be changed easily by the person himself. The narcissist is unable to be alone with his or her isolation is unbearable and even terrifying to the narcissist, because she needs to feed off the constant attention and validation of others. For the narcissist, isolation equals starvation, obsession with appearance, and not just their own perfect appearance, but everyone else's imperfect appearance too. The narcissist will always find flaws in everything and everyone, and will never miss an opportunity to point them out to you and everyone else. The narcissist firmly believes that they are better looking than everyone else and will let you know this at every opportunity. The narcissist will fish for the compliments. And strange thing, especially when comparing themselves to everyone else within the narcissist sphere. Because people either flee the narcissist or have unwittingly become a part of the narcissistic supply and are embarrassed by this, their narcissist personality very often goes unchallenged. The narcissist will then take the game as far as they possibly can, getting even more outrageous by the time challenge comes. There has been much pain, damage, and often total destruction of a family, business, or church. Not even when the narcissist gets caught or reaps the consequences of their actions will they express any regret or remorse for wrongdoing, and consequences will always be derived from someone else's mistreatment of the narcissist. The narcissist will never admit any guilt, will never reach out to make any amends, and will never apologize to anyone they have never ever wronged or hurt. The narcissist's lack of remorse is always justified. The narcissist will always suspect and accuse everyone within their sphere of influence of thinking or doing the same evil things they think they do. If the narcissist has stolen from you, then you are automatically guilty of plotting to steal from the narcissist. If the narcissist has slandered you behind your back, then you are automatically guilty of saying bad things about the narcissist behind their back. If the narcissist hates or abuses you, they will insist to everyone that you are the one who hates and abuses the narcissist. The narcissist needs to be the center of attention, the most loved, most praised, most important person in your world and in theirs. The narcissist will try to cause fight and animosity between you and anyone else that they think you love more than the narcissist. The new agey narcissist will blame you for failed projects or negative outcomes. They will claim that you have bad energy or that you have called bad things into existence with your defeatist attitude, when in actuality it was your realistic insight into the future failures of their grandiose schemes This is not normal, healthy competition, but a type of competitiveness that is often bizarre. Narcissists will constantly compare the most ridiculous of things, looking for anything they have or can do that is better than someone else. If the narcissist is unable to produce or claim an ability to do something better than you, then they will minimize and criticize your position and achievements. The narcissist is not your friend ever. They will only pretend to like you, then gossip and ruthlessly slander you behind your back, only to come to crawling back to your ear when they want to gossip about and ruthlessly slander someone else. Remember this. The narcissist has no friends. The narcissist only keeps people that they can manipulate and or to exploit. All conversations will inevitably revolve around the narcissist. You will never be able to have a two-way conversation with the narcissist. You will never talk to you, but they will only talk at you. No matter what the topic of any conversation may begin as, it will always wind up completely focused on the narcissist self with your opinions, beliefs, and mystery, etc. The narcissist firmly believes that they are more insightful and more enlightened than everyone else, despite the fact that the narcissist may be a blatantly vindictive, bitter, hateful, resentful, vengeful, bigoted person at home in their own domain. The narcissist will spend every waking moment painting a different image of themselves and obsessively looking for validation by ensuring that everyone in their sphere of influence accepts and believes in the phony image. The narcissist is constantly miserable with their family and position and will often express unhealthy jealousy or even resentfulness over the families in possession of other people. For example, if you have a happy family life and more wealth than the narcissist, they will constantly wonder why you are so lucky when they are most deserving. A narcissist will change stories and facts to inflate their image of being a rightful, wonderful, self-sacrificing martyr and will often tell flagrant lies to make other people look bad. Just remember that anything you tell a narcissist in confidence will be twisted into a lie and used against you repeatedly. Any criticism, no matter how helpful or constructive, no matter how slight the criticism may be, will be perceived by the narcissist as an attack. The narcissist will overreact with rage and often retaliate in a very hostile and vicious manner. Remember this: when they turn and rip you to shreds, the narcissist is a vengeful creature. Narcissists can laugh the most at their own jokes, think they are the most funny people around, have their own language and expressions for others, often showing disrespect and belittling others. They are sweet. They are highly selective in when they are friendly and to whom. The only person the narcissist will ever pity or feel sorry for is him or herself. The narcissist is completely detached from other human beings. No matter what you or anyone else feels or suffers, the narcissist will turn it around to focus on and feel sorry for him or herself. The narcissist may even let you know that whatever you suffer from, whether illness or calamity, is well deserved. The narcissist will gloat and even laugh over the misfortune of others. The narcissist knows if their true self were to be discovered, that the chariot would be up and their fantasy would be shattered. They will go to great lengths to keep the chariot up, such as silencing the victim through verbal assault, narcissistic rage, and threatening them. They will also become involved in smear campaigns claiming the victim is psychologically ill or a drug addict or alcoholic. The irony is that these things are exactly what the malignant narcissist's true self is composed of. It is called projection. Challenging a narcissist and trying to topple them from their pedestal is very dangerous and potentially detrimental action. Once you point out the many inconsistencies in their story, then you are seriously stepping over the lines as far as they are concerned. The insult and injury you are now inflicting on them is so severe and traumatic to them that they may now lose every semblance of normality that they were pretending to portray. Growing up, the scapegoat can understandably feel very jealous of the golden child. This, of course, leads to friction between children, which suits a narcissistic mother, divide and conquer and all that. Loss of opportunities for triangulation. Indeed, the golden child can be encouraged by the narcissist mother, either overtly or tactily, to bully the scapegoat, which adds to the friction. Narcissists know the difference between good and evil will not win anyone over, so his champion-like ability enables him to change for the individual set of circumstances at hand. He needs to extract narcissistic supply he needs for his victim to believe he's everything and she needs. Evil will not deliver on that so far now. He will make the victim believe he's good, too good to be true, and that's exactly what he is, too good to be true. Survivor quote. They try to intimidate you with their anger. Most back down in fear. If you stand up to them and don't back down, they will go tell everyone some lie so that if you expose their behavior, no one will believe you. Sadly, the folks they lie about you too will believe the knock, walk away, you won't win. The others will eventually have a fat fallout and you can explain it all to them once the veil is removed from their eyes. They say only around 0.7 to 1% of population has a narcissistic personality disorder. Unfortunately, this number is not backed up by any sound research. It is just a very rough indication. When just following a theory of Beck and associates about how a narcissistic personality comes into victim, have to be many more narcissistic at how possibly up to 20% of the normal population. But to be honest, this is a rough guess as well. The child victims of the narcissistic parents are simply there to supply the parents' ego-boosting reassurance. The parents need the child to adore and agree with them always, something that the child gets very skilled at doing when in the presence of the parent. Away from the parent, these children are often depressed, anxious, and morose, as if they have simply given up on being a normal child. It's most impossible for a narcissist to stay friendly to everyone all the time. This is the largest difference between a self-assured, self-confident, and seemingly arrogant but healthy with normal personality and a narcissistic personality talking everyone into account and treating them equally as the priority number one of a normal, healthy personality. For the narcissistic personality, this is next to impossible. The soulless narcissist will try to attach himself to the other in leeching-like, try to inhale their life's blood. Because he's incapable of a true relationship, he can only do it in a framework of evil, destruction, abuse of human beings, and unquestionably experience extreme and fundamental delight in the doubts and suffering of others. They also take pleasure in subjugating and humiliating them. A very simple and highly effective way to detect narcissists is to publicly criticize their thinking and behavior. Have an unstable self-image, they will react either immediately in public, not usually, or later when taking you on alone. There is no known cure for narcissistic personality disorder. No one bounces back from NPD. A narcissist remains isolated, immature, and emotionally disabled until he she dies. A narcissist continues to target new victims and to destroy their lives. Narcissists are a danger to society. A narcissistic personality has in its core a damaged self-image, very weak, very likely caused by several traumas during his upbringing. The recipe for this is easy to give. Just make sure you spoil your child, then it gets everything very easy. With this, you teach to let it believe that everything is specially arranged for him, her, because she is so special, so unique. That's what a child can easily assume and used to think. When it gets so much attention and special care, it is also very important not to teach it to handle frustrations. If you accept the narcissism per definition is unethical and antisocial behavior, pattern behavior that indeed damages and hurts other persons, then you can do nothing less than oppose or attack it. Whenever you see someone stealing something, you should take some action against it as well, because not doing something just gives the narcissist the idea that such antisocial behavior is okay. When you reach the end of your tether and can't take the abuse any longer and you're about to make or break, despite the fact that you have been left with no money or anyone to turn to, the narcissist then offers you relief from those feelings, knowing that the relief from all the confusion will suck you back in, and then they repeat the process and spit you back out and do it all over again. The more dangerous narcissists are those who fully realize that they should not explode in public. Often they only explode when they are alone and with the one giving the criticism. Such an emotional outburst is always extreme, out of proportion, and not fitting in the context. Of course, everyone has such explosions once in a while, but with a narcissist, this is a structured, non-structuring pattern. To condone antisocial behavior like narcissism at work simply means that more and more antisocial behavior will be reinforced, increased. Others who see that someone is not punished for exhibiting antisocial behavior will tend to show more antisocial behaviors as well. Soon a negative spiral will be seen. Many will arm themselves against this antisocial behavior and therefore become aggressive as well. Narcissists suck and leech on the mind, emotion, and the soul of a victim. It's almost as though they are feeding on their victim's feelings, and for this reason, narcissists are commonly referred to as emotional vampires. They suck on their victim's confidence, self-esteem, and sanity in order to regulate their own egoism. This is something which is never likely to change. Narcissists very rarely change or even make the effort. They would rather repress awareness of the narcissistic traits and convince everyone that you are the crazy one, even if you know the facts and have solid evidence. They will never admit the truth. Their deceit is pathological. A major motivation for the narcissist is the gaining of the power. It is their drug, as they believe that power is their due, and any kind of power will do, including the power to get narcissistic supply to the power to infuriate or make others angry or shocked, or even the ability to control those in superior positions. The narcissist's public persona is vital to their life. Any attack on it is the most insulting thing you can do to them. They will have worked long and hard at concocting their public image, and now here you are, a mere inferior source of narcissistic supply who is supposed to be stupid and incompetent, and you just should not be able to see through their peers' act. So how could you possibly be telling them that your public face is a farce and that you can see straight through it? Survivor codes of narcissists can't stand it when you have a legitimate medical issue. It's the prime time for them to have it just that bit worse. You have a headache, then they have a flu. Heaven forbid you have a legitimate reason to take care of yourself or be taken care of. Many narcissists tend to turn into hypochondriacs or even more to really become physically sick, at the toll of the act becomes too much for them to sustain over the long term. Some research indicates that the separation of all their emotions and negative feelings make them more susceptible to illnesses like cancer because of everything they feel they have to repress within. Because narcissists are naturally talented imposters, charmers, and deceivers, many just get duped on a routine basis by NPD parents who are simply using the good and the just to continue to humiliate, exert, control, and abuse their eggs and force their eggs to react to them in some way. The narcissistic personality will demonstrate backhanded, insulting behaviors to others in order to let them know how special the narcissist is and how others should be adoring them. Behaviors like totally ignoring others, being late for important meetings or events, simply not attending or walking out of events, consistently going over budget, avoiding being a team player at all costs, refusing to consult or ask for help are all common back-handed behaviors. Narcissist love is a love for a person other than the self, perceived subjectively. As part of the self, a person relates to someone narcissistically if he or she experiences that person not as the center of their own independent activity, but as part of his or herself. If the person does not behave as a narcissist one expects or wishes, he or she may be disappointed, offended, or even enraged. The narcissist feels, as Alice Miller puts it, almost as if an arm ceased to obey us. Narcissistic injury is far more impactful to the NPD person. One theory is that from a very young age, the child who becomes an NPD individual was totally and consistently overindulged with the parents to such a degree that they never had to experience the real life events or disappointments, or anyone telling them that they occasionally are wrong and make errors. These parents defend their child's behavior to the nth degree and are overindulgent both physically and emotionally. The narcissist takes your creativity, your emotions, your thoughts, the mind, but they can't take your soul unless you give it freely. Your soul is your last stand.